My name is Brittany Boyd, and I wrote this prose piece about 14 years ago in 11th grade. Let me find the page. Okay, and it's called Another Challenge to the Dream. When I read the email that I had won second place in Carnegie Mellon University's Martin Luther King Jr. Day writing contest last year, I felt very proud of my accomplishment. In addition to winning second place, my article was also featured in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette newspaper on Martin Luther King's birthday. I was excited that my story had been recognized as a good piece of writing, and I was even more excited because I knew that I would be able to speak in a university setting. This honor meant that my concern about colorism would be heard at a respectable college. When I took my place at the podium, my heart was beating fast and my palms were sweaty. However, I also felt a sense of great pride to be able to present my story. I was sharing an important message of the need to stop colorism. Shortly after the contest, while I was at school, a message appeared on the message board addressed to me. I wondered who would be sending me mail at school. My friend Natasha and I went into the bathroom so that I could read the letter in private. When I opened the letter, I saw that it was regarding the essay I had written for the contest. So immediately I thought to myself that it must just be a letter congratulating me on how awesome they liked my essay since it was featured in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. However, the more I read the letter, the more that I saw it was quite the opposite. The stranger who wrote the letter to me identified himself by an address label that had a picture of General Robert E. Lee on it. In addition, a Confederate flag had been copied on the right side of the paper. It never occurred to me that the letter that I had received would be one that would cause me fear, nervousness, and a deeper understanding of racism. In the opening of his letter, he wrote, "I dispute the common Black claim of white discrimination against you people, an objection that confused me because my essay focused on colorism." The letter also included another provocative statement, such as, "I don't call it discrimination for us whites to take reasonable, self-protective steps to protect ourselves against Black violence and Black crime. And you Blacks run your mouth, and the white power structure caters to you Blacks and gives you Blacks whatever you demand." As I read the letter over and over again in my school bathroom, I grew more angry and fearful of this man. Tears began to build up in my eyes, yet I was too embarrassed to let my Black friend, Natasha, see me cry. I was confused. First, why did this man write such crude remarks to me? I was only in 11th grade. Second, why were his words so hurtful and racist? For the first time in my life, I did not feel like a human being. I felt like an animal. Being referred to as you Blacks with such negative connotations stirred up feelings of anger in me. I was hurt and embarrassed. Finally, I let Natasha read the letter, and when she was done, I had to catch my school bus. As I walked out of my school's doors, tears rolled down my face. During the bus ride home, I couldn't help but read the letter over and over again. And when I got home, I ran into my mom's arms and showed her the letter. The tears were uncontrollable at that point, and I was entirely distressed. My mom immediately tried to soothe me with her tender words, as she always does when I am upset. And she told me to try not to focus on this man's words. From the tone of his letter, he appeared bitter, and there was nothing we could do to change his feelings. She then reminded me that only I can control how I reacted to his letter. I have many friends from various races, and I have always felt accepted. However, amidst the diversity within my group of friends, I finally realized that some people will believe in the white supremacy and Jim Crow racist laws. In all of my life, I have strived to live by Martin Luther King's lead and not react violently or crudely when racist slurs or thoughts have been said to me. Even though I had gotten this rude letter from this man, my values did not have to budge or change. I would continue to lead a good life and be an example for others. I did not react rudely to the letter. From this experience, I realized how humiliating an attack or of verbally degrading and vulgar words can make anyone feel, whether you're white, black, man, or woman. However, it is an individual's choice how he or she will react to the situation. I truly believe that this concept of maintaining individual integrity is the message that Martin Luther King Jr. wrote of and displayed. Yes, he was called every name in a book, imprisoned, and sought out to be killed. However, rather than reacting with violence, he reacted with tolerance and intelligence. Thank you.
It's called Some Hip Hop Show. Music is shaking this bright midsummer day, bumping vibrant air into our bodies, pushing us into thick oscillations to broken beats. The papery cotton of my white Oxford shirt rubs against the thick softness of hoodies at my left and right. I think about my mom's usual reaction to this music, not a favorable one at all. She wants melody and can't justify the lyrics' meaning for the beauty of their beat. I think about her metered didactics on community and the trends of isolation and distrust rising in our society, on how they move her. Then the music pops off. Some fuse has broken. The circuitry of this part cannot handle the power it takes to bring unity to this peppered crowd. All bodies land in some pose for a second, having just been reborn into a rhythmless world. They start to scan their surroundings. Some hip-hop elder feels the judgments bubble up a little, the heavy throb that had been hammering it down now gone. Beatbox, he yells, beatbox. An MC to the left picks up where the dead turntable is left off. He starts spitting and hissing. He is alone for a second, but knows we need time to come back. An MC to the right pops his hands together over his head and scans us like a wise father. The MC to the center charges up his lungs and calls us to clapping, quote, "'cause they ain't no music less we making it." Hands come together. Then they come together harder. Then MCs left, right, and center are respectively spitting, clapping, and calling for us to clap harder, to bring back the thump. We try with all we have to tell ourselves, to tell each other, that the circuitry of our humanity can handle the power it takes to bring unity to this crowd. The music booms back on, and we cheer and try to believe that we need it. Thank you.
This is a poem, it seems like much more than just a year, but it's a poem I wrote last year. It's called Questions for a Black Mother, and it's for Ayanna Monet Stanley Jones. Mommy, what's a police state? A SWAT team launches a flashbang grenade through a window. It shatters out a song, and the orchestra of Caught Blue Night feeds in through the broken glass. See, we're in the colored section, 2010. Boarded up windows. Graffiti pops on the side of abandoned buildings. No playgrounds here. Weeds grow tall instead. Mommy, what's apartheid? The grenade has burnt up the edge of a Disney princess blanket. They kick down the door and plunge into the house. An officer's gun cocks back. Bang. A bullet slices through the air and it makes home in a 7-year-old's head. She's asleep on the couch next to her grandmother. It obliterates fresh knowledge how to spell cat and how 2 + 2 = 4. The SWAT team kicked down the door and the little black girl was sleeping. She was playing dead anyway. She wasn't alive anyway. She wasn't human anyway. Black bodies plastered on TV screens. Cracked backs, gunshots, turning clocks, and every minute the pool of blood soaks deeper. Autopsies, genocide by proxy. And these very urban soldiers appear smiling on the 11 o'clock news. Their badges shine. Mommy, mommy, what's desensitization? Fluorescent lights spin. Red carnations bloom on the little girl's pillow. Her grandmother holds her and weeps. January 2015. The officer who fired the gun is acquitted of all charges. Tears flood all of Detroit. The news spews distortion. Ayana's grandmother reached for the gun. Did you mistake her hand flying out to stop the bullet? Maybe she was reaching for survival, for humanity, for protection. The news spews the logistics of these ballistics, offering explanations for murder, but it's simple. Since slave ships first docked here, the wombs of black women have been graveyards for their future children, fate sealed by the effigy of their race, because black children are always black before innocent. But Officer Joseph Weekly's mother smiled and beamed when he joined the police academy, saying he has so much promise. Thank you.
I wrote this when I was a junior in high school. I'm a freshman in college now. It's called Black Tigers. When I was 7, my friend and I invented a game. We called it Tigers, an activity that mostly involved a lot of crawling around and fake growling. Ah, a black tiger. I don't like black tigers, my friend shouted during one particular session of such a game, as I backed him into the corner of our classroom, growling and swiping with imaginary claws. I don't remember getting angry or upset with him, but what I do remember is my teacher holding me tight for a long time afterwards, as if trying to protect me from something, and telling me that it would never happen again. I'm not sure how severely my friend was punished, if at all, but I don't think we played tigers again after that. We were quite young at the time, but already we had established there was a difference between the two of us. My friend was a tiger, I was a black tiger. I didn't see the significance of this event until much later, when I heard someone claiming to be colorblind. Not the kind that makes it hard to tell red from green, but the kind that supposedly stops one from seeing race. It's silly to pretend that true colorblindness can ever truly be achieved. To ask someone to enter a room without noticing the differences of the people around them is completely unreasonable. Back in prehistoric times, when we were constantly threatened by the natural world around us, noticing differences in one's environment is what kept us alive. Today, we continue to notice differences, whether consciously or unconsciously, not necessarily for survival, but rather so that we can assess and safely navigate through different social situations. We all do it, so why all the fuss when it comes to race? The colorblind perspective attempts to simplify a very complicated topic, and often comes from people who don't have to think about race. Because skin color has never been an issue for them, they decide it's not an issue for anyone. They can simply bury their heads in the sand like ostriches and hope that maybe if we start talking about the problem, it will go away on its own. But this is not the case. My childhood friend saw the difference between my skin and his, but then he went a step further and declared that he didn't like tigers like me. So the problem isn't acknowledging differences. The problem is valuing or treating people differently because of those differences. Those who label themselves as colorblind are attempting not to see color, but in reality, it is what allows them to avoid seeing injustices. I can't really blame these ostriches for burying their heads in the sand. Talking about race is difficult for all parties involved. But I've also seen the alternative, complete and utter silence on both ends, and it isn't much better. I have attended a predominantly white school for most of my life, And although silence around racial issues is not uncommon in this kind of school setting, I will admit that I've been lucky. Many Black kids, especially Black girls, struggle socially when they attend predominantly white private schools. Fortunately, I've been able to thrive socially at my school, aside from a few bumps in the road here and there. There was a time during my sophomore year when racial tensions were particularly high, and a few of my Black sisters and I decided that we needed a day for us. Dressed in black, hair picks in our afros, we entered school the next day, a single unit, together in solidarity. It wasn't long before we were called into a meeting with our dean and the faculty advisor of our Black Student Union, BSU, on the grounds that several white classmates had felt threatened by our wearing black. The blatant racial stereotyping that had brought us into this meeting was only a small part of the problem. We tried to explain what had brought us to this point, why we were dressed in black and scaring the other students, the racially charged arguments in the school hallways, the white students' determination to ignore our concerns about their behavior, the angry tweets when the in-school conflicts continued online. But the dean and BSU faculty advisor, who was also Black, were not convinced that our protests had merit, even when we described in detail the kinds of things we faced as Black students among mostly white peers. The students' use of racial slurs in casual conversation, the boys who decided that white girls would always be better than Black girls, the insistence by both staff and students that our issues weren't valid. Once we had finished our stories, I clearly remembered the BSU advisor making the following assertion: if we had not called attention to ourselves, none of this would have happened. And although this statement angered me to no end, to some extent she was right. If we hadn't formed a Black Student Union, this would not have happened. If we hadn't forced our classrooms to give a damn about race, this would not have happened. If we hadn't dressed in black, none of this would have happened. But we did dress in black that day, and we did talk about race, and we did start a Black Student Union, and I'm glad that we did. Because if we hadn't done those things, our school's problems concerning race would never even get close to being resolved. Where our advisor was oh so very wrong, however, was in believing that without our actions, the racial tension in our school would simply disappear. Perhaps in the eyes of someone who does not come face to face with the injustices a Black student can face, this is the case. But the absence of action does not eliminate conflict, it only masks it. I don't blame the administration, at least not anymore, because I know that their job is to keep peace. But the kind of attitude that our BSU advisor had, that we should avoid calling attention to ourselves, is a dangerous one. This attitude brings the peace that the administration wants so badly, but this kind of peace, as Dr. King would describe it, is a negative peace. It is a peace that allows white students to keep their heads in the sand and to condemn those of us who dare threaten the security of their willful ignorance. It is a peace that allows those in charge to only do what is necessary to calm rough waters without targeting the source of the problem. It is a peace that silences the voices of those who want to educate their peers but are afraid of creating conflict. It is a peace that values white feelings over the importance of Black voices. The shocking truth is that I am, whether people like it or not, a Black tiger. No amount of willful ignorance or head-burying sand can change that. When it comes to the fight for social justice, accepting this is only the first step, and it is the only easy one. After that, the hard part is acknowledging that because we aren't colorblind, and because we do see race, sometimes people are going to be treated differently and unfairly because of how they look. Confronting this unfair treatment is at the heart of the fight for social justice. To deny that differences and injustices exist is bad. To blame these injustices on those who speak out on them is even worse. Colorblindness seeks to help the voice of the oppressed quiet and increase the volume of those who are comfortable with the racial status quo. Joining the Black Student Union at my school has been a liberating experience for me because I did not have to pretend to be colorblind, and neither did anybody else. For the first time, I was surrounded by peers who supported me and who told me that it is okay to talk about being Black in school and in America. Of course, as our BSU advisor had already pointed out for us, when we have these conversations, we are going to call attention to ourselves. We are going to make waves. But I would rather be at the center of attention, at the heart of the battle, than be a spectator to a negative peace. Thank you.
I never wore an ethnic dress. I never marched in a nationality parade or drew a family tree or said, "These are his eyes, her mouth, it runs in the family." I looked for myself in strangers, stood in a grocery aisle surveying the slope of a woman's nose, the color of her hair. I never felt hurt by a racist joke, never visited a concentration camp or burial mound, clutching my chest, the old oppressed blood still beating on. I never got a letter the way my sister got a letter, never analyzed the handwriting, questioning the love in the scribbled L-O-V-E. I only ever whispered, I hate, to my parents who weren't there to hear me. I only ever screamed, I love, to my family that is. Cried with my family that is. Camped in the backyard, built birthday cakes in the sand, watched thunderstorms from the patio, huddled together with my family that is. And I learned more each year what that word means, but I never wore an ethnic dress.
Hi. So I agreed to do this if I was allowed to give a little preamble, which Jim agreed to. So I'm Anya Martin, and my poem is called Racing in America. I wrote it when I was 21 years old, in 2002. I'll give you a minute to do the math on that. So a long time ago, when I started college, you were supposed to bring a Webster's College Dictionary with you to school. I don't know if anybody else was supposed to. My parents didn't go to college and were not supportive of me going to Carnegie Mellon to study theater. But they did buy me this required book, Webster's College Dictionary, to take with me to school. That and a laundry basket. Mennonites are very practical people. When I felt lost, I would sometimes turn to Webster for answers. And when Jim Daniels assigned this poem, 16 years ago, for those of you with math skills like mine, I started the assignment by looking up racist words, including the N-word. And after a list of definitions, my dictionary informed me that the N-word was the most offensive word, quote unquote, in the English language. It actually said that. I thought this was quite exceptional. I had never seen anything like that in my dictionary before. And I showed it to my roommate, like you do in college, and who said, fuck that, they can't quantify the worst word. I think cunt is the worst word. I honestly had never heard the word cunt before, so I looked it up. When I was 21, there were a lot of things I knew I didn't know. And that's okay, that's life. No one's born knowing everything. Learning is about what this journey of life is all about. But there were a lot of things that I didn't know I didn't know. Like the privilege that the color of my skin affords me. Though I am beyond honored to be included in this book, I have to say I'm not particularly proud of this poem. However, I am proud of the milestone this poem represents for me in my journey of learning, and in particular my ongoing journey of learning more about racism in America and my part in it. I know that I still have a lot to learn and unlearn, and I have learned just hearing 4 poems before me. The poem ends with a question, spoiler alert. That question is, you know? In drama school, they teach you to play actions, not ideas. In a question, there is an inherent action to play, to ask. Never make a question rhetorical, because then you take away the action. So really ask the question, then play the action. As an artist, a mother, and a human being, I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to ask a lot of questions to many different kinds of people, and I'm grateful for their courage and trust in me to listen. So thank you all for coming out tonight to ask the questions, to listen. Let's keep playing the action. So here is the poem. Racing in America. In my college dictionary, there are 24 definitions of race, beginning with obvious entries like number 1, a contest of speed, as in running, riding, driving, or sailing, to number 17, a group of persons related by common descent or hereditary. But then it becomes more obscure with definitions like an urgent effort, as when a solution is imperative, a race to find a vaccine. And then you fall into deep shit like number 21, a classification of human, especially, sometimes formally, based on arbitrary selections of physical characteristics such as skin color, facial form, or eye shape, now frequently based on genetic markers such as blood groups, ... end quote. You can't even read all the definitions before your mind is racing off to some romantic African plain where the natives compete barefoot, or maybe the Orient where the locals pedal through jungles filling their rice bowls, or even to German farmers sailing across the ocean to cut down trees, farm Indians' land. Maybe you don't know where the race begins, where the starting point is. Home, maybe? Yes, I did hear my father tell a racist joke, but I was much smaller then and didn't get it. It had something to do with a black man on a boat with M&Ms. I can hardly remember. But jokes were a funny thing, see, because when you're a certain color or heritage, you're allowed to tell some jokes, you know? But not everyone can do this. It takes a long time to figure out which jokes are illegal, how and when you're crossing the foul line. For I have laughed at sushi jokes, imitated all accents like ghetto slang, Hispanic taco, and redneck kicks, but there have been times when I did laugh. Like in 7th grade at a Holocaust joke, something about breaking ashes. I didn't think that was funny. But we all hear the starting gunshot at different times, sprinting out of the blocks at varying speeds. Speaking of which, I ran track in high school, and there were 3 black girls on the whole team. Damn, they were fast. They usually are, aren't they? Now, see, you're not supposed to make generalizations like that. For example, I have a foster sister whom I love. She's from Brooklyn. She's black. Wait, not that everyone from Brooklyn is black. In fact, there's a guy in my acting class from Brooklyn, and he's white. But anyway, my foster sister is fat and can't sing or run fast, although she does have soul. But we all do, right? Now, see, that's one of those lines where we smile and agree that we're all the same. You see the red and yellow and black and white hands shaking. Embrace diversity. And embracing diversity is great until you bring another race home as your dinner date. Then your mother, who may even teach 1st grade and have a similar poster with rainbow hands shaking hands in her classroom, suddenly sees that embracing diversity was taken a little too literally. Because you can be open-minded and still be a little racist. And sometimes that's even okay, because you can't deny the fact that there are cultural differences. And not admitting that you have them could be even worse. But how do you even know if you have them? Your prejudices. It's not an easy diagnosis to make or a disease to cure. Ever since I knew that it was bad to make preconceptions, I've been trying not to. Yet I learned in social psychology that making generalizations and preconceptions are inherent to survival. If we thought out every situation and were open-minded about everything, then we might not live so long. For example, if someone comes in with a gun and points at your head, you analyze too long, ask too many questions about what's going on, and then you'll probably end up dead. But then don't go categorizing all robbers, murderers, and rapists as black, even though there are twice as many black convicts as white. But that's because of our racist system. It's all cyclical, being born in poverty breeds poverty. Yet when I'm walking alone at night and 2 large black guys come up behind me, I must admit, I get a little more nervous than if they were 2 white guys, even though I have been raped by a white man and seen poorer white people in my life than black or Hispanic. But that's not what this poem is about, because men are often assholes, all kinds. Although the Spanish ones are more aggressive, so you need to be especially careful with them. Now you're thinking, oops, she messed up again. Another gross generalization that is displaying her subconscious racism. That's what I would have thought too, until I worked in DC all summer, walking to work from Columbia Heights and praying not to get whistled or stared at, followed by men on the street shouting, "Mamacita, ooh!" And I've tried to help. I've spent entire summers in the ghetto teaching underprivileged children and teachers. I've made mission statements. I've corrected narrow-minded thinking among my friends and family, explaining words like gentrification and self-fulfilling prophecy. I've been the only white person at poetry bars, wrapped with 7th grade black students knowing full well that I have no rhythm. I can even manage to eat really spicy ethnic food. Indian is my favorite. My roommate is Japanese and she's teaching me how to use chopsticks. I've been the righteous do-gooder, felt the white guilt heavy upon my shoulders, and at the same time relished patriotism for this great nation, racism and all. I have tried to believe in definition number 20 of race, the human race, or family, humankind. But that's hard too, since God save us all, we hardly know what being human means. I mean, there are 7 definitions for human alone, not even taking into consideration all the things that being human entails, like love, hope, hate, fear, etc. I can't get my head around it. And I'd like to say that if we all just put our heads together, we could circle the colorful globe embracing diversity, like a love ring around Jupiter, and save the whales while we're at it. But I just don't know. You know?
I'm 30 years old now. I wrote this poem when I was 14, 15 maybe. I'm happy to have my best 2 girls here to support me, my Miss Cregan and Mrs. Kristen Kovacic. They were my writing teachers, so that really means a lot to me, guys. And my 3 kids in the back, if they make noise, you can slap them. So this is entitled Chocolate and Vanilla. Tamisha and I went to Sarah Hines' house building every Tuesday after school. And every day, we walked into that building hand in hand, terrified of the white girls that roamed on every floor. I was 8 years old and Tamisha was 12. Tuesday was swimming day, so we had to get dressed. Walking back into the locker rooms, clinging to Tamisha's left arm, we staggered through a soul-train line of dirty looks and smirks. Crammed into one bathroom stall, we struggled to put our bathing suits on. We didn't want them to see our skin or our scars. Mama once told me that chocolate and vanilla did not mix. We listened for the locker room to clear of loud chuckles, screams, and wet feet slapping against the tiles. Shoulder to shoulder in the tiny stall, wrapped in our small blue towels, we tiptoed out of the locker room and slid into the showers. The steam, the water, burned my chocolate-covered body. I wanted to know what it felt like to be popular. I wanted to have straight, sassy hair and smooth legs. Instead, I had hair that was nappy and legs that were scrawny and useless. As we stepped out of the showers onto the cold, damp floor, the steam followed us to the pool. Jill, the gym teacher, rolled her eyes at us. I could see the veins bulging out of her neck. She swallowed hard and told us to get in. The water rippled rapidly away from us as we put our toes into the water. We stayed on the shallow side of the rope. Tamisha and I couldn't swim, and we would never learn. I watched the girls punch the volleyball back and forth over the net. Tamisha was floating alone in the corner, practicing how to hold her breath. I was wishing I could replace Tamisha with one of those deep end girls and hold them under the water just long enough so that they reached the surface gasping for forgiveness. I floated closer to the rope so that I could watch them play the game, and I saw them whispering. I'm sure I heard them say that I was polluting the water. A few seconds later, the ball flew over the rope and hit me in the face. It hit with a force that sent blood showering into the pool. The girls jumped out of the water, sending shrill screams and laughter bouncing off the walls. With my busted nose, I cried, climbing out of the pool. My tears and blood mixed together and found their way to the crease of my lips, tasted like injustice. I looked back into the pool, and like vinegar and oil, my blood separated. Jill moved slowly toward me and told me to go to the nurse. Tamisha and I walked down the hall in our wet bathing suits, shivering, half naked. We walked on the cold marble floor, searching for the door that said nurse. When we reached the office, there was another girl there, stretched out on the resting bench, holding an ice pack on her pale blue ankle. The nurse gave me a plastic bag with 3 ice cubes in it, instead of a pack. And I sat in a rusted brown chair with particles of paint falling from it. I was sent home 20 minutes later, holding that baddie of warm water up to my face. My nose was red, scratched, swollen. Little drops of warm blood trickled down and stained the hairs above my lip. Every time I scrunched my face or had the motive to sneeze, my nose shriveled up and my eyes watered. Tamisha kept telling me it was going to be okay. And at that moment, I knew that it wasn't. Okay was her way of saying that it wouldn't happen again, or that it would, just not to me. Ever since I was a child, my mama told me to be proud that I was Black. Walking out of the building, I knew I had let her down. My pride had been shattered into pieces by a single game of volleyball. When we got home, I told my mama everything. She took us out for ice cream to try and cheer us up. Thank you for being strong, she said, looking at me in the rearview mirror. I forced a smile on my face. which sent a sharp pain through my cheeks, my nose still broken. When we arrived, the lady asked us what flavor we wanted. When Tamisha chose chocolate and vanilla swirl, I looked at her. I chose strawberry.
Great. This essay is called Fighting a Forbidden Battle, How I Stopped Covering Up for a Hidden Wrong. I once belonged to a wonderful religion. I belong to a religion that allows those of us who believe in it to feel that we are the greatest people in the world, and to feel sorry for ourselves at the same time. Once I thought that I truly belonged in this world of security, self-pity, self-proclaimed intelligence, and perfect moral aesthetic. I thought myself to be somewhat privileged early on. It was soon revealed to me, however, that my fellow believers and I were not a part of anything so flattering. Although I was fortunate enough to have parents who did not try to force me into any one set of beliefs, being Jewish was in no way possible to escape growing up. It was constantly reinforced at every holiday, every service, and every encounter with the rest of my relatives. I was forever reminded how intelligent my family was, how important it was to remember where we had come from, and to be proud of all the suffering our people had overcome in order to finally achieve their dream in the perfect society of Israel. This last mandatory belief was one I never fully understood, but I always kept the doubts I had about Israel's spotless reputation to the back of my mind. Our people were fighting a war, one that I did not fully comprehend, but I naturally assumed that it must be justified. We would never be so immoral as to fight an unjust war. Yet as I came to learn more about our so-called conflict with the Palestinians, I grew more concerned. I routinely heard about unexplained mass killings, attacks on medical bases, and other alarmingly violent actions for which I could see no possible reason. Genocide almost seemed the more appropriate term, yet no one I knew would have ever dreamed of portraying the war in that manner. They always described the situation in shockingly neutral terms. Whenever I brought up the subject, I was always given the answer that there were faults on both sides, and that no one was really to blame, or simply that it was a difficult situation. It was not until 8th grade when I finally understood what I was on the side of. One afternoon, after a fresh round of killings was announced on our bus ride home, I asked two of my friends who actively supported Israel what they thought. "We need to defend our race," they told me. "It's our right. We need to defend our race." Where had I heard that before? Wasn't it the same excuse our own country had used to justify its abuses of African Americans 60 years ago? In that moment, I realized how similar the two struggles were. Like the white radicals of that era, we controlled the lives of another people whom we abused daily, and no one could speak out against us. It was too politically incorrect to do so. We had suffered too much, endured too many hardships, and overcome too many losses to be criticized. I realized then that I was in no way part of a conflict. The term Israeli-Palestinian conflict was no more accurate than calling the civil rights movement the Caucasian African-American conflict. In both cases, the expression was a blatant euphemism. It gave the impression that this was a dispute among equals and that both held an equal share of the blame. However, in both, there was clearly an oppressor and an oppressed. And I felt horrified at the realization that I was by nature on the side of the oppressors. I was grouped with the racial supremacists. I was part of a group that killed while praising its own intelligence and reason. I was part of a delusion. I thought of the leader of the other oppressed side of years ago, Martin Luther King. He too had been part of a struggle that had been hidden and glossed over for the convenience of those against whom he fought. What would his reaction have been? As it turned out, it was precisely the same as mine. As he wrote in his letter from Birmingham jail, he believed the greatest enemy of his cause to be not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who lives by a mythical concept of time. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. When I first read those words, I felt as if I were staring at myself in the mirror. All my life, I had been conditioned to simply treat the so-called conflict with the same apathy that King had so forcefully condemned. I too held the role of an accepting moderate. I too lived by a mythical concept of time, shrouded in my own surreal world and the set of beliefs that had been assigned to me. I had never before felt so trapped. I decided to make one last appeal to my religion. If it could not answer my misgivings, no one could. The next time I attended a service, there was an open question and answer session about any point of our religion. I wanted to place my dilemma in as clear and simple terms as I knew how. I thought out my exact question over the course of the 17-minute cello solo that was routinely played during the service. Previously, I had always accepted this solo as just another part of the program, yet now it seemed to capture the whole essence of our religion, intelligent and well-crafted on paper, yet completely oblivious to the outside world. The soloist did not have the faintest idea of how masterfully he was putting us all to sleep. When I was finally given the chance to ask a question, I asked, I want to support Israel, but how can I when it lets its army commit so many killings? I was met with a few angry glares from some of the older men, but the rabbi answered me. It is a terrible thing, isn't it? He said. But there's nothing we can do. It's just a fact of life. I knew, of course, that the war was no simple matter, and that we did not by any means commit murder for its own sake. But to portray our thousands of killings as a fact of life was simply too much for me to accept. I thanked him and walked out. I never went back. I thought about what I could do. If nothing else, I could at least try to free myself from the burden of being saddled with a belief I could not hold with a clear conscience. I could not live the rest of my life as one of the pathetic moderates whom King had rightly portrayed as the worst part of the problem. I did not intend to go on being one of the self-chosen people, identifying myself as part of a group to which I did not belong. It was different, not being the ideal, nice Jewish boy. The difference was subtle, yet by no means unaffecting. Whenever it came to the attention of any of our more religious family friends that I did not share their beliefs, I was met with either a disapproving stare and a quick change of the subject, or an alarmed cry of, "What? Doesn't Israel matter to you?" Relatives talked down to me more afterward, but eventually I stopped noticing the way adults around me perceived me. It was worth it to no longer feel as though I were just another apathetic part of the machine. I obviously can never know what it must have been like to be an African American in the 1950s. I do feel, however, as though I know exactly what it must have been like to be white during that time. To live under an aura of moral invincibility, to hold unchallengeable beliefs, and to contrive illusions of superiority, to avoid having to face simple everyday truths. That illusion was nice while it lasted, but I decided to pass it up. I have never been happier.
I wrote this, I want to say, 7 or 8 months ago. It's titled Being a Minority in the School of the White and Privileged, a step-by-step guide. Step 1, your name. Remember the proud dignity that was once your name? But remember that even the phrase proud dignity itself is a teeny-weeny bit challenging to pronounce, and even more difficult to spell. So when it comes to the proud dignity of your actual name, expect some alterations when you first announce it to your peers. Usually, in order that your name becomes palatable for even the simplest of speakers, the alteration will arrive in the form of a shortening. But in special cases, if your name is versatile enough, be prepared for many renditions. For example, if your name is Jabril, one can expect names like Stabil, Jibbo, Jibby, and maybe even Jigaboo. Be sure to laugh along with the other kids. Always laugh along with the other kids. Because you want to make a good first impression. Also, be sure to recognize that the beautiful cascade of sounds that is, or should I say was your name, is now whatever your class considers its most hilarious perversion. Your name has now become entertainment with its new purpose to amuse rather than to manifest your individuality. Don't expect the hilarity to go away anytime soon. You're stuck with it. Of course you would be. It's your name after all. Step 2, where are you from? Now depending on your hue, some people at your school, students, faculty, administrators, and staff, might anticipate a certain exoticism to your birthplace that a simple Hartford, Connecticut just won't do. As if attempting to wring some sort of secret artifact on you. The dissatisfied will ask again, and again, and again, putting increasing stress on the word from each time. Suggestion. Don't think of the question as, where are you from? Think of it more as what makes you the other, a minority. Or, if your people have been kidnapped and enslaved, and if records have been kept, try to imagine what your nationality would be if you were to look at a contemporary map of the world. Try your best to satisfy the inquisitive asker to that end. Step 3, racial humor. A significant element of presenting as black in a majority white school is the categorization of every single attempt of racial humor that uninvitingly lands on your doorstep as funny and harmless. These pitiful excuses for comedy really deviate from the classic, haha, your insert race here format. However, the 5 iterations of this same joke can and will occur in a multitude of situations. Being like the class might inspire, he was on his own CPT. The act of running might inspire, he's so fast because he's used to running from the cops. If the word if the word black is introduced in literally any context while you're in the room, the environment will become slightly darker than usual. No matter how much you may protest your race and all the struggles inherent therein being reduced to the mere punchline of a joke, always be sure to laugh at every single one. Because you don't want to be seen as oversensitive and as someone who can't take a joke, do you? And besides, laughing is often, not always, but often, way better than the alternative, in which you're forced to believe someone was attempting to perpetuate America's oldest and most horrific traditions. So you laugh and hope it's the last time you have to hear it. It never is. Lastly, a short list of banned foods. Chicken, especially fried, watermelon, Kool-Aid, or any drink that resembles Kool-Aid, so particularly opaque brands of fruit punch are also out. Remembering and applying what you learned here should make your school experience bearable, painless even. Just know that you'll need to remember these steps throughout elementary, middle, and if you're really unlucky, high school. But do be careful when going out into the world, because there's a whole different set of rules for that one.
So this is entitled An Unforgettable Journey, and in high school, I was able to travel to Africa, which, I grew up in East Liberty, black neighborhoods, but to be around that many black people was shocking. But I wanted to write about history and culture and experiences, and what we took from that. I'm actually going to take this off. So here we go. I remember a brown globe that was always near me. The globe that I had as a child took me to far off lands such as Iceland, Russia, Zimbabwe, Guatemala, and so many more. There were moments when I would stare at the globe for hours and wonder what it would be like to live in a place other than America. In middle school, I was faced with the harsh reality that I did not know my origin. Everyone in my class basically knew where they came from, whether it was Poland, Ireland, or Israel, they all knew where they came from. I knew I came from someplace, and that place was called Africa. I was in the art room at the time, and I listened to a student speak of being Jewish and speaking Hebrew. I did not know what my language was, but I knew that I had one. I also knew that somewhere in the motherland that I had family, that my ebony skin didn't shine like the warriors of 1,000 tribes for nothing. Years after my art class, I was a sophomore at the Pittsburgh High School for Creative and Performing Arts. I was in English class when the student body was dismissed for an assembly. In the brown seats that filled the auditorium, I marveled at what I heard. The man standing on stage said any one of us could take the opportunity to make a trip to a new land. It was my chance to see a link of myself other than in America. I had chosen Ghana as a country that I wanted to explore. It seemed interesting, and its culture of gold mines, tribes, and slave castles seemed rich. I was granted the opportunity to go to Ghana that summer by the Experiment in International Living. I nestled right in with my group. My group and I had been traveling and touring the country for a few weeks when we were notified that we were going to a slave castle. Ghana has 2 slave castles, the Elmina Castle and the Cape Coast Castle. Both castles were fortresses of terror. They were holding places for human cargo. The Elmina Slave Castle was the one on our agenda today. The Elmina Castle was one of the first slave trading areas in Africa. It was constructed in 1482 by the Portuguese, but was then captured by the Dutch in 1673. The castle served a major role in trading with Brazil and the Caribbean. Now it is a place where tourists can come and see the harsh realities of slavery up close. We stood outside of the castle. From the outside, it looked marvelous. The architectural work was distinctive. The cannons that lined the wall and the drawbridge at the entrance of the castle let me see something real. We were at the Elmina Slave Castle. The slave castle was in Cape Coast, which is a city in Ghana that is a large fishing area. We walked over the top of the drawbridge and were met by the tour guide. I wondered what I might learn that day. I was thinking over and over that I was probably standing on a spot where my relatives stood. I reminisced about the history of slavery that I had been taught, but this is something that had more significance than a textbook. I was actually somewhere that mattered. I was face to face with the ghost of tragedy. The guide led my group, teenage students and a few adult leaders, to the dreadful dungeon where they held the male slaves. I imagined it. People packed as tight as sardines in the tent. The cramped space was not fit for anyone. The musty air filtered in and out, and the paint-chipped walls seemed like a border separating the pain of the slaves from the others. The guide told stories of men fighting for food, air, and life. The room was about the size of a city playground, but hundreds of bodies, souls, and lives were packed into the room. I felt sick because I could see and hear the cries of affliction, and the upper part of the dungeon was a hole. The hole let in light and air that barely helped. The dungeon and its tears ripped my soul. The tour guide led us to a place behind the dungeon. He took us to a door where slaves could not return from. It was called the door of no return. The door was the right size for a child, but it was what the captives had to pass through. The door was closed, and I could see the light encompass the outside crowd. The guide opened the door, and I looked through its battered frame, the same frame that 30,000 slaves had passed through by the 18th century. These lights had passed through that day by the 18th century. As a young African-American male, there is not a lot that history books teach me about my heritage besides the occasional civil rights movement chapters and sections on great motivators like Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. This was probably going to be the closest to my ancestors as I would get. I could not pinpoint the exact African country my ancestors came from or their names. I only know that it all intertwined and passed through me. I did not have any direct relatives outside of the United States, but I know they exist. I do not have a special language that I grew up speaking in my home, but it seemed that I had found something. The group, the trip, and Ghana helped me realize that I also have a history. Outside, the waves of the ocean splashed together in harmony. The breeze helped calm my soul. I had experienced something that I had not experienced before, and I felt free. I felt free because I had something to remember. Thank you.